Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We here are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host. Before we get too much into this, let me get the usual spiel out of the way. If you could subscribe on whatever your particular platform of choice happens to be, give the show a rating, be that an individual show or the podcast as a whole, if at all possible. I know iTunes in particular, or Apple Podcasts, whatever they're calling themselves now. Uh, the ratings for stuff like that really helps. It helps boost the algorithm, and it's what people who might be interested in sponsoring the show tend to look at as much as anything else. So it would help me out a lot if you could interact with the product just a little bit. Thank you very much. On the agenda this evening, I didn't plan to start out talking about this because I figured it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but I'm gonna have to start out talking about Tyron Woodley and Jake Paul. And we'll get to that in just a minute, so please bear with me, and please don't turn off the podcast. Just well, let me get there. After that, UFC on ESPN 40, that took place this last Saturday. That will take up the bulk of our time, I imagine. And this upcoming event, UFC on ESPN plus 49. Darren Till pretty badly needs a win. He'll be taking on Derek Brunson in your main event. And then whatever bits of news we have coming out of the week, just a little bit, I think. So I've got to start with this. I didn't anticipate starting with this, but I'm going to start with this. So I agreed to provide some watch-along commentary for Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley's boxing match. I did this with those two just concluded their fight over on Showtime pay-per-view. I did that with Mark Radulich. We both kind of we did the one for we had done one of these for the Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather exhibition. And yeah, but that whole affair was a little bit yeah. We figured we'd try this one out. Neither of us were doing anything. We'll just kind of see what happens. The fight wasn't all that interesting, being honest. To the shock of no one, Jake Paul was the better boxer. Woodley had his moments. Won the fourth round. He kind of wobbled Paul in the fourth round with a right hand. Um, but as watching it live, my initial inclination was 7-1 or 6-2 for Jake Paul. That was what I thought. That was what I think most people thought. That's what I think Steve Farhood was one of those two scores. I think the most generous scoring you could give would be 5-3 in favor of Jake Paul. If you give Woodley I think it was like the fourth when he rocked him, which he clearly won. The eighth, which was a little bit wonky and sure, I guess. It's not a hill I'll die on. And then I think it was the fifth. So you could maybe give 4, 5, and 8 to Woodley. My opinion, if you're being generous. And I thought this was nothing. Like, we watched the fight, we talked about it. If you're interested in the watch-along commentary, you can find that over in the W2M family of podcasts, the W2M network. And I can't listen to the broadcast while talking about it with Mark because it all comes through my headphones, and I can't. It becomes too much of an auditory mess. So we get to the end, and I'm not listening because I have this thing muted, so I can hear Mark because I'm talking with another human being. And they announce Jake Paul winner. Jake Paul gets his hand raised. The little tag comes up along the bottom, unanimous decision. At which point Mark and I both go, okay, we'll do plugs and we'll get out of here. Which is what we did. Well, funny thing, if we'd stuck around for a little bit longer, one of us would have looked on Twitter, in fact we did, and seen that no, this was not a unanimous decision. This was a split. I said this on that show. Watch this be split because boxing. And I said that facetiously because judging in boxing is, if you guys think it's bad in MMA, and it is bad, in fact, I'm going to yell about one of those fights, one of those scorecards a little bit later. Because there was a fight on... Okay, I'll get to it. Saving my anger until then. It's worse in boxing. It really is. It is so much worse. It is one of the biggest barriers to entry, I think, for newer fans. The horrible scoring that crops up more often than not. no reason that Tyson Fury should have had a draw with Deontay Wilder in their first fight. Canelo Alvarez has had a couple of fights that I thought he lost. The Triple G fights in particular, just screwed Triple G in those, and I'm still not happy about that. It happens, and I think that's one of the big barriers to entry for fans. This ridiculous, I don't know how much of it's corruption, I don't know how much of it is incompetence, or what happy marriage of the two, but it exists. And then I looked at the individual scorecards. And my head about it. So, saw that it was split, and sadly, Mark and I were done recording. We were still talking to each other, but the recording's done. It's starting to be uploaded. Like, the process has started. The horse is out of the barn as far as getting that back. We both had to spend a few minutes decompressing. Like, wait, what? So, the official scorecards, I will read these to you, courtesy of the Ohio State Athletic Commission. 3 judges. Judge, I'm probably going to mispronounce this gentleman's name. I'm going to assume a degree of pronunciation based on the last name and what I think is correct. Jaime Garanya, something like that. My apologies again. I'm not trying to butcher your name, sir. He scored rounds 1, 2, and 3 for Paul, 4 and 5 for Woodley, 6 and 7 for Paul, 8 for Woodley. I don't agree with that. Again, the 5th round, I didn't give the 5th round. Personally, I did not give the 5th round to Tyron Woodley, but that's not a hill I'm going to die on. And the 8th round was a weird round, so I'm not going to hold the 8th round in isolation against anybody. But point being, 5-3, so a total of 77-75 for Jake Paul. Perfectly acceptable. Phil Rogers gave the first 3 rounds to Jake Paul. He gave every other round to Tyron Woodley. This is utterly indefensible. The 4th round, Tyron's. Across the board, everyone agrees. The 5th round, okay. Can see the argument, not a hill I'm going to die on. 6 and 7, though. I have no words. I straight up have no words for that. It's absolutely, utterly ridiculous to have scored this fight this way. You know how bad that is? The next judge we're going to talk about, Dana DePaulo, and I'm assuming the pronunciation, these are not printed names, these are not typed names, they are handwritten, so my apologies if I'm incorrect. First 2 rounds to Paul, 3 and 4 to Tyron. I disagree on 3, but going off my immediate recollection, that might be somewhat... Again, the other 2 judges gave the 3rd to Paul, so a little bit suspect, but not the end of the world. 4 to Tyron, clear. 5 to Paul, 6 to Paul, 7 to Paul, 8 to Paul. That's a more defensible scorecard than the one in the middle. And there's rounds I disagree, and I disagree with the 3rd round there. This is asinine. It's like, I don't know if you've seen, you listener out there, if you've seen Superman 3, the original with Christopher Reeve, Richard Pryor. Do these judges have to do Richard Pryor? I feel like they're drunk, right? There's the scene where he's just trying to hack into this computer system, and there's the security system that you do is you inserting a couple of key cards into these 2 different slots at the same time. And they're far enough apart that no person could reasonably get them in at the same time. And he does this great, both keys at the same time. Yeah, he follows it up with this really funny, get ready for the Philly Flash. He, like, Jerry rigs a rope to this other drunk security guard. He got the guy drunk, and that's... Anyway, is that the level of complication we're dealing with here? You need some poor dumb judge like, I'm supposed to watch both fighters at the same time to score. I don't understand this. It's it's indefensible. Rounds 4 through 8 going to Tyron Woodley is utterly indefensible. Fire this man. That's ridiculous. And I didn't have a dog in the fight as far as who I'm rooting for. I am not here to tell you to feel bad for Jake Paul. You hate that guy, fine, whatever. I don't care. I am not here to advocate for him as a human being. But that should not have been a split decision. This is not about Jake Paul. It's not even about, well, the right guy won, so who cares? No. That's not how this works. When you start letting the little things slip, everything starts slipping. Oh, this is asinine. I'm looking at the scorecard and I almost want to throw up. Like, it's that bad. Oh, those scores had to have been turned in before the fight, right? They almost have to have been. You almost had to have had all three of these people sit down, fill out their scorecards, and if it goes the distance, this is what we're giving the people. And if it doesn't, then no one will care. Like, that's the only way you could come up with that. And naturally, Tyron Woodley said the scoring was BS. It wasn't. And he wants an immediate rematch. Oh, I don't know. I don't know about the appetite for that. I mean, speaking briefly about the fight, to Tyron's credit, he wobbled Jake Paul he wobbled him in the fourth, landed a good right, but the man is a bit shot. You have to call a spade a spade. He doesn't pull the trigger as often. His boxing stance was all off. He fought real low, was bending real wide stance, bending low at the knees. He fought in more of his like MMA wrestling stance than he did in a boxing stance. He came out, I mean, he was in shape and he didn't visibly gas. You could see when he slowed down, but 8 rounds of boxing is not like 5 rounds of MMA fighting. The pacing's different. What you're using in terms of your weapons and how you can kind of manage your output, it's just different. Like very well-conditioned MMA fighters. I mean, TJ Dillashaw got tired sparring with Vasily Lomachenko because fighting at 3 rounds fighting for 3 minutes is different than fighting for 5 minutes. It just is. And say whatever you want to say about Dillashaw, the man's cardio was never in doubt. Well, you want to say that was helped by his drug use or not? Well, I leave that to you to make your own jokes. But seriously, always in shape. If he could get tired just by switching up the round structure, then everyone's going to. So he got tired, but he didn't gas out. Jake Paul was the better boxer. Who'd have thought? The guy who spent more time boxing is the better boxer. Film at 11. But God, the scorecards, man. That's just so bad. That's so bad. And to make matters worse, like they polled social media. Like 58% of the people who responded to the social media posts, like, yeah, Tyron won. You morons. First of all, a bunch of that is going to be skewed by how much people hate Jake Paul. And like I said, I am not here to weigh in on your opinion of Jake Paul as a human being. But you're going to get a skewed result right away. Second, idiots who think that going forward wins fights when you're walking into punches the whole way, some of them are, in fact, professional judges, and it boggles the mind. Oh, God. Forward, especially boxing, right? The scoring criteria for MMA and boxing is different. Forward pressure in boxing is only really to be scored in as much as it generates effective offense, which is not, believe it or not the same wording that is used when it comes to mixed martial arts. To the chagrin of fighters everywhere, it's not. In fact, the original set of unified rules actively reward you for coming forward whether you land anything or not. So take that however you want to, I suppose. But people who think that going forward means you're winning, God, it was just stupid. It was just stupid, and it speaks to boxing's ineptness and corruption and whatever measure you want to put onto each of those, as far as it plays into this. Just stupid. No, I didn't want. I was going to save that to be a midpoint between the two events as part of just like a, yeah, this happened. Here's a few thoughts. But then the scoring came out, and I couldn't. I have to speak about that, or it's going to sit in my head while I talk about everything else. It just, oh, ridiculous. So good on Jake Paul getting his fourth professional win. Good on Tyron Woodley for getting the biggest paycheck of his entire combat sports career. I don't give a crap what Dana White says. I absolutely believe Tyron's people in this respect more than the UFC. 100%. As for the rest of that event, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Amanda Serrano got a pretty clear unanimous decision win. Very briefly, I don't know why female boxing bouts are 2-minute rounds instead of 3, but that needs to change. Make those 3-minute rounds, people. I don't like I said, I don't understand why you have that set up the way that you do, but it needs to change. What else happened? Heavyweight fight ended quickly. Um, Tyson Fury's younger brother Tommy, who gained some notoriety by being part of, I think it was like Temptation Island or some variation of that in the UK. One of those types of reality shows. He got a really lackluster unanimous decision win against a guy he should have shellacked. He went all 4 rounds. Not the best look. Um, I mean, for his career, the man, he's a good-looking man. Uh, saw this on Twitter. I have to repeat it. The Fury brothers are proof that an entire generation of us as humans were lied to about your physique dictating your combat prowess. Tommy Fury looks like he's chiseled. Man's cut out of stone. He looks great, and then you have Tyson Fury, who just with his shirt off. I'm not here. I am not fat shaming the man. He got fat at one point, and then, to his eternal credit, battled through his demons. And they're demons those are the kinds of demons you fight until you're done. You fight until the day you die. You are going to be battling some of those demons. I've got some of them, not to the degree that he did. Certainly not all of them in common, but not to get too personal, but I have battled depression since I was about 13 or 14. And that is something that I will, even on a subconscious level, because when you can get to fighting it subconsciously, that's actually kind of when you're really winning. That's something I'm going to fight probably for the rest of my life to one degree or another. But Tyson Fury does not look like he was cut out of stone. And Tyson Fury is maybe the best heavyweight in the world, whereas Tommy Fury is a average, slightly below average cruiserweight, I suppose. Yeah, and was there another fight there? I think there was one more. Clearly didn't leave much of an impression if there was. Oh yeah, Montana Love defeating Ivan. Last name's escaping me. Baranchik. Yeah, Ivan Baranchik. Anyway, I got there. Really nice stuff from Montana Love, actually. Baranchik's quarter stopped that between rounds 7 and 8. Good stoppage by his corner, I think. Smooth boxing from Love. In control pretty much the whole fight. Got clipped once, but only the once. So good stuff out of Love. I don't know that he'll get a title shot. He was calling for some form of title fight. I think he mentioned Gervonta Davis. Going to be a bit of a tough sell given what Davis is looking to accomplish. So we'll still kind of wait and see on that. But he looked good in this fight. So kudos to him, I suppose. And that is the boxing discussion for the evening. Just shame on those judges, Phil Rogers especially. I don't know what you were smoking or what you were drinking, man, but you should not have been judging that professional boxing fight. Straight up. Just straight up disgraceful. Alright, so with that out of the way, let us move on to UFC on ESPN 40. This came to the world from the UFC's Apex facility in Las Vegas, Nevada. Served as the finale of The Ultimate Fighter's return that no one cared about. At least I legitimately know. I have seen, not just me personally, I knew I was never going to watch this. A giant chunk of the people that I used to watch and talk MMA with have pretty seriously fallen away from the sport, which is understandable. MMA is kind of cyclical like that. So I wasn't surprised that no one I knew was watching it, but I also have a relatively small social circle, and my social media footprint, such as it is not virtually non-existent. But I didn't. I have seen exactly one person who is not a paid shill or just a UFC employee say that they're watching this season of The Ultimate Fighter. Exactly one. I believe that was Aaron Braunstetter, who mentioned that he was watching, and God bless him if he did. God bless him for enjoying it if he did. I watched not a single solitary second. So we'll get to those fights, to the finale fights for that in a minute. In your main event, Giga Chikadze defeats Edson Barboza via TKO punches 144 of the third. This wasn't your fight of the night. I mean, given... We'll get to your fight of the night. But we'll get to that. But I enjoyed this quite a bit. First round, pretty clearly Chikadze. Second round, I thought Barboza started getting back into things, and then Giga's able to... He hits this really nice stepping knee to the body, follows it up with a right hand that kind of wobbles Barboza. Then he just goes to unload along the fence. Barboza drops. Giga gets on top. Threatens him with an anaconda, switches to a Darce. They fight back up, and he drops him again, and the ref's seen enough. Barboza wasn't crazy about the stoppage. Just speaking briefly about the stoppage itself, you could have let this go on, I suppose, but I was okay with it. Watching it, doing it live, I went a little bit, maybe not unjustifiably early, but probably about the earliest you could justifiably stop it was kind of my thought. And then I watched the highlight again and went, no, I'm more okay with that. I'm okay with it. Really, really big win for Giga Chikadze. Beating Barboza is not an easy thing to do. Stopping him with strikes. Not saying it's never happened, but that does not happen. When was the last time he was stopped with strikes? Hang on. Okay, Gagey knocked him out. Then, okay, the doctor stoppage in the Lee fight, okay. Because Tony tapped him out. Johnson was a decision. Cerrone choked him out. He dropped him for... So, yeah, he first of all, he just doesn't lose all that often, and then he doesn't get just outstruck all that often. People who had a lot of success against him on the feet usually did so via pressure, more so than I'm just the better striker. And I'm not going to get into the nuance of, well, does being the better pressure fighter make you a better... That's way too deep into the weeds. I picked Barboza last week in large part because I thought Giga wouldn't be much of a pressure fighter, and he wasn't in the traditional sense, in the forward pressure sense. I also thought he would allow Barboza to find his kind of rhythm and timing. And kudos to Giga, he didn't. And he didn't do it by, again, the way most people try to fight Barboza is they kind of run at him. Because when you do that, he's not as good. He stops setting his feet. There's a long history of that being a problem for him. Giga disrupted him purely with rhythm and timing disruptions, which is a much more difficult thing to do, but he did it. Both men's defense was on point, especially through the first round. They were both throwing hard kicks, and they were getting checked. Those boys had some sore shins. I would bet a lot of money on that. But Chikadze got the better of it as a general rule. Second round, Barboza started being able to collapse into more of the boxing distance rather than strictly kicking, and found some success that way. And then third round, Giga just fairly quickly got the finish. Giga, after the fight, said he wanted to be like the backup for a title fight, or he wanted to fight Max Holloway. Calling out Max Holloway when he's not the champion, that's rare. Like that takes some guts. Max Holloway is just one of those guys that, unless he's the champion, doesn't really get called out. Tony Ferguson used to be that way. How many people, when he was on his winning streak, and arguably the best lightweight in the world, how many people were calling out Tony Ferguson? I can remember one guy. I remember Islam Makhachev called him out. And it stood out because it doesn't happen. If you're the champion, people call you up because they want to they want to become champion. Like that's part and parcel. But when you're not the champion, and who's calling out Max Holloway? I mean, especially after what he did to Calvin Kattar, but who's calling that guy out? I mean, the answer is pretty much no one. No one. Every featherweight, if they get an interview, they get asked, what do you want next? When can we expect to see you back? It's part of the script for the post-fight interviews, apparently. How many people say, I want to fight Max Holloway now that he's not champion? I don't think I've heard a single person call him out since he lost that belt. Kattar, I don't even think Kattar did. I'd have to double check that. He might have called for it. He's the one I'd have to double check, but you don't see it because one, he's really, really like Max Holloway doesn't lose all that often. There's not a lot of upside there if he's not champion to taking that fight. I mean, the upside is if you win, you're kind of a made man at featherweight if you beat Max Holloway at this point. Unless you're Alexander Volkanovski, in which case everyone whines that you should have lost the last fight and whatever. It's just he's just one of those guys you don't call out. There's other fighters ranked in and around that space that are easier. I mean, Max Holloway is one of the toughest fights in the featherweight division in the world. You got like Max and Volkanovski, maybe AJ McKee after what he did to Pitbull. But let me put it like this. If you're being tasked with fight Max Holloway or someone else at featherweight, unless there's a championship on the line, you're pretty much always going to pick the someone else. Calling that man out is, again, takes guts. And I don't know how the timing is going to work out on this. You could do Giga against... Look, if they make Giga and Max Holloway, give those two men 5 rounds, first of all. I would almost insist on that as a fan. Give them 5 rounds, and they would turn in a heck of a fight. Heck of a fight. I don't know that this win necessarily will do that for Chikadze, but I mean, just the fact that he called him out is going to make a lot of waves. You could do Giga and Yair Rodriguez. That would be a fight, assuming Rodriguez ever gets his crap sorted out. But Giga's undefeated in the UFC, and he's finished his last 3 opponents. One of them was kind of a late notice. I hate to call Jamie Simmons a nothing, but late notice, step up. Then he TKOs Cub Swanson with a body kick and follow-up punches in the first round. And then he finishes Barboza. That's a heck of a run, and that's deserving of a fairly big fight for his next fight. So, I would think one of those guys nearer the top. He might even get if Volkanovski beats Brian Ortega, and my inclination at the moment is to pick Volkanovski. Ortega and Giga would be a fight. He's probably due somebody like that after this. Just throwing that out there. As for Barboza, it's a rough loss. His ability to reinvent himself at featherweight was not something I saw coming. I mean, you could argue he won the Dan Ige fight, and on rewatching that fight, I'm much more sympathetic to the case that he did. Then he wins his next two clean. Uh, and when he first said, "I'm coming down to featherweight," a lot of us, myself included, we raised an eyebrow at that one. Like, really? But he figured it out, and he's gonna drop a little bit because of this loss, and it might end his title aspirations. How old is he? Yeah, Barboza's 35. He'll be 36 in January. Um, 35, almost 36, well, almost. At featherweight, man, this might do it. His next one is going to be more telling. Like, if he's able to get a big win in his next fight, he might be able to string together another series of fights towards it. But uh, I'm not going to call this completely backbreaking. But if he drops his next one, yeah, that'll be it for his title aspirations. But good win for Giga. Pretty good fight for as long as it lasted. This did get Giga a Performance of the Night bonus. Let's move on. Your middleweight finale fight for Tough. Brian Battle defeated Gilbert Urbina via rear naked choke, 2:15 of the second. Urbina came out. He took this fight on short notice. This was supposed to be Battle and somebody else. What's that guy's name? Hang on, I'll find it. Treson Gore. Urbina came out and pretty much put everything he had into those first 3 minutes of fighting, and then after that, Battle just kind of worked his way back into it, got him down in the second, got his back, choked him out. It was an fight. Your fight of the night was the bantamweight finale from this season of Tough. Ricky Tercios defeated Brady Highstand via split decision. There were 29-28s. I was 29-28 Highstand, but 29-28 for either man is acceptable. Highstand clearly gets the first. Tercius clearly gets the third. Second round becomes the swing round, and that was a close round. So 29-28 either man, perfectly acceptable. This fight was nonstop. I don't say that lightly. These guys went at it for pretty much every minute of every round. Somebody on Twitter compared Tercios, called him like a Filipino Miguel Torres. Not quite as lethal as Torres was, although there's a very serious question to be raised about whether or not Miguel Torres would have been as lethal as he was then if he were fighting now, even at his best, but neither here nor there. But you can see where that comparison comes from. He was on his back for a lot, but he was always doing stuff. This was a nutty fight, man. These two guys went out there and they scrapped for 15 minutes. No issue with either man getting their hand raised at the end. Your fight of the night, deservedly so. This is probably going to go on my list of potential fights of the year. I don't think it'll finish in my top 5, but it was nuts from start to finish. This fight did not stop. It absolutely, whatever you want to say about the technique, and I could say plenty, this fight absolutely did not stop. So kudos to them for that. Next up, another fight I was looking forward to, actually. Daniel Rodriguez defeated Kevin Lee via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. I was 29-28 Rodriguez. Lee had the first half of the first round, both men kind of felt each other out. It was leaning towards Rodriguez. Then Lee gets a takedown, gets into side control, is able to get some damage, certainly has enough positional dominance and work to win the round. Unfortunately, he's not able to maintain that. In the second round, Rodriguez stops his first takedown, and it's kind of all downhill from there. He starts popping him with the jab. Rodriguez has smooth hands. He's good about probing with leg kicks. he was kicking Lee to the inside leg when Lee was because I think Rodriguez is normally southpaw. He was kicking to the inside leg. Anytime Lee would go southpaw, he'd kick him to the outside of the leg. Rodriguez is just a very tough, very talented fighter. So Lee gets a takedown in the second, but he stops the first one. He gets one later, but Rodriguez wall walks fairly easily. Clear round for Rodriguez going to the third. Rodriguez is rolling at this point. He gets taken out at one point again, but again is able to get back up before Lee's able to do anything with it. Just good jab work, good combinations when he threw them. Solid. Rodriguez is he's not ranked, or wasn't going into this fight. I mean, that's sad, man. His only loss in the UFC was a decision to Nicholas Dalby, and I know he's kind of done the, I don't consider that a loss. Well, I do. I scored that for Dalby. I think most reasonable people did. But apart from that, he's 6-1 in the UFC. And he's got some pretty decent wins. He choked out Tim Means in his debut on short notice. He knocked out Dwight Grant. Beat Mike Perry pretty clearly by decision. Got a good win here over Kevin Lee. I think that man, he may not be due an official ranking, but he's due a fight with someone towards the bottom of those rankings. Is kind of my feeling on the matter at the moment. Who's at the bottom of welterweight at the moment? Also, Rodriguez took this fight on fairly short notice. He was replacing Sean Brady. Brady was supposed to fight Lee here. Would have picked Brady pretty easily there. Easily might be a bit of a stretch, but I would have picked him and not had a whole lot of reservation about it. Let's see. We've got Robbie Lawler is going to fight Nick Diaz coming up. You got him and Muslim Salikov would be good. Got Santiago, him and Ponzinibbio, man. Okay, that's the one I'm going to start. That's what I'm going to mention. See, Li Jingliang has a fight. He's fighting. Who is he fighting? But I can't, for the life of me, remember. It was a surprising fight. Because it's who is he fighting next? It's just going to annoy me until Chimaev. That was it. He's fighting Khamzat Chimaev. So he's kind of out of the running at the moment, but I'm going to say Ponzinibbio. I want to see Daniel Rodriguez and Santiago Ponzinibbio. That's my fan matchmaking for the moment. So whatever value you give that's what I want next. Good fight. Let's see, middleweight Andre Petroski defeated Michael Gilmore via TKO, punches and elbows from. He had Gilmore gift wrapped. He was in basically full mount. Had one of the arms gift wrapped around the front of the face and was just hammering him. Petroski's got problems. He's pretty green, but got the win here, so kudos, I suppose. Your upset of the night, Gerald Meerschaert, the biggest underdog on this entire card, defeated Mahmoud Muradov via rear naked choke, 149 of the second. Muradov had a good first round. The problem is he hit Meerschaert clean several times, but never enough to put him away. And Meerschaert was swinging back and was able to get his respect. Meerschaert's kicking game seemed to... This is weird because he uses it in every fight, but he doesn't use it a lot. But he hit some decent kicks, and then Muradov just seemed to... There were a couple of times when he tried for a finish, and I think he might have poured a little bit too much out. Because in the second, didn't quite have the same movement, didn't quite have the same pep, and his technique went away a little bit too, which is a bigger sign of especially shoulder fatigue. He was swinging the punches a little bit anyway, but he really started swinging. And Meerschaert was able to hit him, get a takedown into the back, and Meerschaert's grappling is very good. So, kudos to Meerschaert, man. This is a non-trivial setback for Muradov, but hopefully he can learn from it. That guy still has a lot of ability. Just for as many fights as he has, he hasn't really. This is the first time in a while he's lost. since 2016, actually, and that was a injury-related loss. So if you want to go outside of injury, you have to go all the way back to 2014. Uh, Hopefully he can grow from this. I'm still a pretty big believer in his upside, but you've hopefully he can learn from this. Is kind of the long and the short of that. So, uh, good on Mershart, man. And apparently there were some people showing off their payouts for betting on him. Some of his teammates, Anthony Pettis, I know, showed off. He put like, what were the odds on this? You were getting like what 4-1 on your money, I think something like that. So, uh, good bet for some people. If you took that bet, cash that ticket, man, and be proud because you bet a pretty big underdog with some good value attached to that bet. If you're a gambler, there was value there, especially at those odds. But so hopefully Muradov rebounds. Good win for Mershart. This is kind of about the level I think he's gonna cap out at. He said he wanted to step up in competition. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. Unfortunately, those 2 losses were pretty bad before that. He gets stopped by Ian Heinisch and then Khamzat Chimaev. I think they might give him his step up, but I don't know. I think this is just kind of the level he's going to be at, but not the worst place to be, all things considered. And that was your main card. As for the prelims, oh boy, Abdul Razak Al Hassan knocked out Alessio Takiriko with a head kick in 17 seconds. Takiriko they were opposite stances. Southpaw for Takiriko. Who's it, Takiriko? I always screw this guy's name up. I apologize. I think it's Takiriko. Takiriko kind of just bent in, kind of folded into a C a little bit. I think he anticipated that kick going to the body. Ducked right into the kick to the head. The old sickening thud on impact. That wasn't the louder kind of slap like a baseball hitting in a bat. This was like baseball bat hitting a watermelon. Just thunk. Heck of a knockout. Wellington. Oh God. Wellington Turman defeated Sam Alvey via split decision. The scorecards were 28-27. One of those for Alvey, 2 of those for Turman. You arrive at the weird scores here because of a 2-point deduction that was handed to Mr. Turman in the 3rd round. He poked Sam He had kind of been poking. He'd poked Sam Alvey in the eye a little bit earlier. He did it twice in the 3rd round after getting a stern warning in the 2nd, and each infraction cost him a point in the 3rd. So, you arrive then at a score of 28-27 for Turman if you give him all 3 rounds, and then he just has the 2-point deduction. The last round becomes a 9-8, technically for Sam Alvey. I have no earthly idea how Adelaide Bird arrived at 28-27 for Alvey. That scorecard makes no sense to me. It just doesn't make sense. You would have to, how would you have to math that out? You would have to have, had them 1-1 going into the 3rd, and then given the 3rd, had them 1-1 going into the 3rd, then gave the 3rd to Turman. Yeah, okay, so that's what she had? That's ridiculous. I mean, here's the bottom line. Turman won all 3 of those rounds. I don't know which round she gave to Sam Alvey. I don't care to look it up. It doesn't matter. It's not defensible which of those first 2 rounds she gave to him. It's not. He didn't win either of those rounds. I don't even think there's an argument for him winning either of those rounds. This is ridiculous scoring. Again, this friggin' judges deciding to. Okay, you over there, you move your key at the same time I move my key, and someone in the middle has to be the Philly Flash. Just what are we doing here? So that the scoring there, asinine. Let's just start with that. And God, and then here's what kills me about this. What really kills me. Let me tell you about Sam Alvey. Okay? Just tell you about this guy. Sam Alvey debuted in the UFC in 2014, losing a unanimous decision to Tom Watts. He then went on a 3-fight winning streak, wherein he stopped Dylan Andrews, Cesar Ferreira, and Dan Kelly. He was then TKO'd by Derek Brunson and lost a unanimous decision to Elias Theodorou, at which point, perhaps logically, the UFC could have parted ways with him. They chose not to, for whatever reason the UFC chose to. He then goes on a 4-fight winning streak, submitting Eric Spicely, TKOing Kevin Casey, and beating Alex Nicholson and Nate Marquardt in 2 of the worst fights you'll ever see. He loses a unanimous decision to Thales Leites in another terrible fight. Wins a controversial split decision over Rashad Evans in another god-awful fight. Loses to Ramazan Emeev and misses weight. Moves up to light heavyweight and beats Marcin Prokhnio. Then gets a split decision over John Vellante in one of the worst fights of 2018. I know that because it was on my list. I wrote about it. It was a terrible fight. He won a split decision. And that, ladies and gentlemen, on June 1st, 2018, was the last time Sam Alvey won a fight. His next fight, he was TKO'd by Little Nog, Antonio Rogerio Nogueira. He was then TKO'd by Jimmy Crute. Lost a unanimous decision to Klidson Abreu. Lost a split decision to Ryan Spann that should not have been split, but the way Sam Alvey fights, apparently he always gets a split. Fought to a split draw with Da Un Jung, which I thought was the correct decision, by the way. I thought that should have been, I scored it a draw. Comes back to middleweight, has the fight of the night in April of this year, actually, when he loses to Julian Marquez after being choked unconscious with a rear naked choke. It took someone with the fire hydrant head of Julian Marquez, and I say that with love, to force Sam Alvey to actually fight. He still beats him. Now losing a split decision to Wellington Turman. That shouldn't have been split. The man has not won a fight. He is winless in his last 8 fights. I want to double check that. 8 or 7. 7. Sorry, excuse me. 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Winless in his last 7. I suppose if you're John Vellante, you think winless in his last 8 because you think you won that fight that those two had. God, the only losers in that fight were the fans, right? So you would think, logically, at this point, he's gone. Hasn't won a fight in over 3 years. Hasn't even come especially close. And yet, when asked about him at the post-fight press conference, Dana White made all the same usual excuses he does about keeping someone on the roster that he just wants to keep on the roster, despite logic. I don't know what this man has over UFC brass. He has pictures, he has videotape, he did something horribly illegal for the UFC at some point, and now he just is there for life because of that. I don't understand this. His fights aren't even good. The Marquez fight turned into a watchable fight. Watch the rest of these. They suck. They're not good fights. This wasn't a good fight. It wasn't even an entertaining fight to maybe hang your hat on logically. No, nothing. Just I hate calling for people to lose their job, especially in MMA, because it seems like an overly callous thing for me to do. So I try really hard, I have recently. When I say I don't think someone should be in the UFC, I don't say it lightly. Especially as the UFC has watered down their own product to the point where being a UFC caliber fighter doesn't mean anything, really. But Sam Alvey, I'm sorry, should not be in the UFC at this point. And yet, for reasons, I suppose throwing a temper tantrum at the judges after the fight shows he still has the fighting spirit that I don't know. I, I I saw someone report that Dana was making those excuses. I listened to like 2 seconds of a clip to confirm that someone wasn't lying about what Dana was saying, and ugh, just ugh. Um, Dustin Jacoby defeated Darren Stewart via TKO, 304 of the first punches. Nice stuff from Jacoby. Very measured approach. Found his spots. Once he got Stewart hurt, he picked his spots on the flurry to finish. Good stuff from him. Jacoby might be a player at 205. It's a fairly barren division when it comes to talent, so he might be someone we want to pay attention to. Women's flyweight action. J.J. Aldrich defeated Vanessa Demopoulos via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. Demopoulos took this on short notice and normally fights at strawweight. The size difference was apparent. Aldrich had a typical J.J. Aldrich fight and won. Featherweight. Pat Sabatini defeated Jamal Emmers via heel hook, 153 of the first. Emmers kind of got Sabatini a little bit with some punches, but they tied up, they fell to the ground. He transitioned into a leg entanglement. He started fishing for the inside heel hook while Emmers grabbed a toe hold. Now, I love a good toe hold as much as the next guy, but there's techniques to finishing it that were not applied here for any number of reasons. And his leg was in much more danger than whatever danger he was representing to Sabatini. Sabatini eventually finds the right bite on the heel hook. That knee of Emmers was not. They put him in an ice in not a. They put him in like a cast, one of those isolation things, and then like stretchered him out. Like his knee was shot. So hopefully it's not completely destroyed, but Sabatini not going to get a lot of press out of his career thus far, but he's a hard-nosed fighter, and if he keeps developing, might be somebody. And kicking everything off, Mana Martinez defeated Guido Canetti via split decision, 29-28. I scored this for Martinez. Wasn't a bad fight, but wasn't especially memorable either. I did score this for Canetti. I can't remember. I did it live. I was this defensive? I don't remember. I have no issues with Martinez winning. I think was ultimately at a bare minimum where I landed. So decent enough win for him. He missed weight. I mean, in fairness to him missing weight, he took this fight on short notice. But he did weigh 140 for a bantamweight fight. So we'll have to see how he. If that was purely a byproduct of very short notice, or if he's got we'll find out going forward. But gotta win. Canetti's a guy who takes up space on the roster. Anyway, that was it. That was UFC on ESPN 30. So thank you very much to anyone who read my live coverage, or read the full report after the fact. Those are available in the MMA zone of 411mania.com. I deeply appreciate all the support that you give to my work. So thank you very much. And let us move on to this upcoming weekend. UFC on ESPN plus 49. This fight has had some pretty serious ups and downs, this card. Bunch of stuff got moved over to here after the August 14th event was canceled. We were supposed to get Paul Craig and Alexander Gustafsson on this event. Gustafsson withdrew due to an injury. We were supposed to get Volkan Oezdemir and Magomed Ankalaev. That got postponed. Alex Morono is stepping in to face David Zavada on short notice, replacing Sergey Khandozhko. And see, Sergey Spivak is stepping in to replace Sergey Pavlovich against Tom Aspinall. We're supposed to get something else. Jack Shore, I think, is on his third opponent. Yeah. All right. Anyway, let's get into what we do have, and some of these do not have a specific place in the bout order because they shift these things around all the time. But your main event, Derek Brunson and Darren Till at middleweight. Look, guys, I can only call this like I see it. This card is a keep the machinery turning card. There's not a whole lot here. Not to say nothing, just not a whole lot. So, but your main event is somewhat relevant for the middleweight division. You have Derek Brunson at 37, has fought himself back into a 4-fight winning streak. Some of those less than interesting fights, but he was the first guy to kind of stop the hype train around Edmund Shabazian. Whereas Darren Till, that guy has had he's not had the best go of it of lately. He's just 1-3 in his last 4 fights. That win itself was a split decision win. I scored it for him, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Sorry, the split was just a little bit weird there. But he fought his way to a title fight at welterweight, had nothing for Tyron Woodley, and was submitted in the second round. Fought Jorge Masvidal and got knocked out in the second round. Moved up to middleweight. Fought Gastelum. I mean, to be fair, I thought Stephen Thompson beat him too. Just throwing that out there. I scored that for Thompson. Then he fights Robert Whittaker and lost pretty clearly that fight. I mean, that was a weird fight. All 3 judges had it 48-47. Yeah, it wasn't like he had nothing for Whittaker. I mean, somewhat by contrast, if you watch, Gastelum and Whittaker, Gastelum doesn't have a whole lot for Whittaker in that fight. Till had stuff. I don't think I agreed with 3-2. I think I was 4-1, but this is a really big fight for Till. If he loses this, 1-4 in your last 5 is always a bad spot, especially trying to get your middleweight career up and running. You beat Gastelum, okay, split decision. You step up to fight the former champion and you lose. Okay, Whittaker, the only guy to beat Robert Whittaker at middleweight is the current champion Israel Adesanya. So not the end of your campaign necessarily, but you lose to Derek Brunson here, you'll be in a really bad spot. I mean, a pretty really bad spot. I think wins, man. Brunson is so hard to predict. Darren Till kind of always does the same thing, and the fight goes for or against him relative to how his opponent deals with it. Southpaw stance is probably gonna... Is Brunson southpaw? I can't remember. I'm pretty sure he's orthodox. No, he is southpaw. How's that gonna factor? Southpaw to southpaw is just such a wonky thing. Because southpaws don't really practice for other southpaws. If you're an orthodox fighter, you spend most of your training time against other orthodox fighters and a bit of it against a southpaw. If you're a southpaw, you spend almost all of it against orthodox fighters and very little of it against other southpaws. It just doesn't come up all that often. If Brunson was orthodox, would that really change my opinion on this all that much? A little bit. Till kind of relies on that open stance. Like the way he throws his left, he kind of needs the open lane. I'm I'm gonna pick Brunson here. I think Brunson's a bit more proven over the distance too, and Brunson is probably gonna try and make this a wrestling match at certain points, which to his credit would be a smart thing. So I'm gonna pick Brunson. I won't be shocked if Till wins, but I feel okay picking Brunson. Let's see. We have a flyweight fight between Alex Perez and Matt Schnell. Perez coming off of that loss in the title fight with Figueiredo, man. Kind of ran him over in just 2 minutes. But he'd won 3 in a row before that. I mean, his only losses in the UFC are to Joseph Benavidez and Davison Figueiredo. That's that's a good record. And then you have Schnell, who's a really good technician. Um, he's coming back down to flyweight. He bounces between flyweight and bantamweight a bit too much for my liking. I'm gonna pick Perez. But Schnell's a really tough out, man. Don't be shocked if Schnell wins that, but I feel okay picking Perez. Women's flyweight, Ariane Lipski and Mandy Baum. Might be the last stand for Lipski. I mean, she's gone 2-4 in the UFC. She's been finished her last couple of times too. Like, she needs a win. And they're bringing in somebody that is making their debut. I'm 90% sure. I'm pretty sure I would have remembered that name if I'd covered it. Let me double check that real fast. Scroll through a bunch of fights. Where are you? Apparently it's not listed here. Did this get moved? And this just, it's listed as being rescheduled. Huh. Well, on the, okay, I'm not entirely sure how to figure that out, how this is listed here, but if it goes through, Baum is undefeated. She is 7-0. And coming off a win in Bellator, actually. Well, she's 6-0 with 1 no contest. Huh. Alright. Well, I might actually... I'll pick Lipski still, but that gets a little bit dicey. So, assuming that fight even takes place on this card, so... Alright, let's see. Light heavyweight, moving on. Modestas Bukauskas and Khalil Roundtree Jr. Roundtree's been out for a while. This is the last fight. No, he fought in January of this year. I just forget that happened. Yeah, I guess I did. I mean, I know I covered it. It was UFC 257. Prior to that, got stopped by Iwan Kutelaba. He missed all of 2020. Jeez. Whereas Bukauskas, Jesus, he beat Andreas Michailidis in his UFC debut, then got finished by Jimmy Crute, lost a split decision to Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. I'm actually going to pick Bukauskas here, but that's mostly because I think Roundtree is... I don't know. I think getting into the UFC when he did not do his career any favors. And at the moment, set to kick off the main card, we have Paddy Pimblett and Luigi Vendramini. Pimblett's UFC debut, he's been a fixture of the Cage Warriors scene in the UK for a while. He's, if you're not familiar with his work, he's a very good fighter. He's 16-3 overall. Won his last 2. Whereas Vendramini, been a little bit hit and miss. Yeah, 1 and 2. I'm gonna pick Pimblett here, but yeah, That's going to be my pick, for whatever my pick is worth. All right, as for the, again, I'm sure that will get added to by some of these other fights. They're probably going to have Aspinall and Spivak somewhere on the main card, but I don't know the finalized bout order yet, so we're just going to go down the rest of these currently as they stand and just know that this is going to change. Molly McCann against Ji-Yeon Kim. Let's see, Kim, boy, she's missed weight a couple of times at flyweight. Didn't for her last fight, but I kind of think McCann might play into Kim's fighting style a bit too much. Might be wrong about that, but I'll pick Kim. Featherweight, Julian Erosa and Charles Jourdain. Let's see, Erosa got stopped by Sungwoo Choi. That was a pretty bad stop. Choi traded a number on him in that. I'm gonna pick Jourdain. I'm not sold on Erosa. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's where I am at the moment. Dalcha Longiambula and Marc-Andre Barrio. If Barrio can do his usual thing about persevering through a terrible first round, which is kind of his thing. He's slow, he's plodding, he gets hit a lot, but he kind of just keeps coming. And then if you can do enough in the first couple of rounds to make him unable to close the gap in the third, then you win. If not, then and Lungiambula, man, I mean, physical specimen, but I don't know that he's built for. I'm gonna pick Barrio there, but if his chin is a little bit cracked at all, Lungiambula will sleep him. I'll put that out there. Alex Morono and David Zavada. What's Zavada doing? He had that pretty nice win over Abubakar Nurmagomedov when he caught a triangle choke. Got beat by Ramazan Emeev after that. The short notice for this makes me lean a little bit Zavada. Morono stopped Donald Cerrone his last fight, though. But he lost to Anthony Pettis before that. Screw it. I'll pick Morono. Just feel foolish when Zavada wins. Bantamweight fight, Jonathan Martinez and Marcelo Rojo. Feel okay picking Martinez. He got stopped by Davey Grant, but Martinez is pretty legit. I mean, not to say that Rojo is some kind of ham and egger. I don't think he is, but I feel okay picking Martinez here. Let's see. Mark Jacasey and Rafael Alves, or Rafael Alves. Where he fights from. Find that at all. Jeez, where are you? I can't find him listed here. Huh. All right. Oh, this is listing him as having withdrawn? He is from Brazil, so it would be Rafael Alves. Well, assuming that that fight does in fact go forward, which is not a given at this point, but assuming. I'm okay picking Jacasey. He needs a win though, man. He had a pretty, he had a, when I say pretty bad outing, it's not that he didn't make a fight out of his fight with Rafael Fiziev, but he didn't have a whole lot for Fiziev. Let's see, Jack Shore and Ludovic Sholinan? Go with Sholinan. Where is that guy from? Oh, Ukraine. I'm probably mispronouncing that then, so I apologize. But picking Jack Shore there, not a terribly complicated procedure. Shore is a fairly legitimate bantamweight. All right. And Paul Craig possibly on the card against somebody. See if they can find someone on short notice. I'm okay picking Craig in the dark, assuming he stays on the card. And somewhat aforementioned, Tom Aspinall and Sergey Spivak, I feel I feel okay picking Aspinall. Tom Aspinall's pretty legit. So, I mean, one of his he's only got two losses. One of them he was DQ'd for an illegal elbow strike. I mean, the other one's legit. He got heel hooked, but Aspinall's no one to trifle with. He might be a player at heavyweight. So depending on how much of that stays together, how much of that falls apart, which who knows at this point, man. But whatever the card looks like come Saturday, I will be covering it in the MMA zone of 411mania.com. So please do stop by and say hello. I always appreciate it. All right, last thing. This is the only bit of news I have for the week, as I'm not usually shy about going long, but I'm recording this later than usual, so I don't want to be here forever. The UFC revealed the card for UFC 268. And I'm not the biggest fan of a couple of these fights, but let me just start off with what they've released so far. Main event, welterweight title fight, rematch between Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. I tend to think this should have been Leon Edwards, my opinion. But Covington's a better box office attraction than Leon Edwards, and there's just not really any two ways about that. Um, I'm curious to see if Covington's wrestling heavy approach, one, if he's telling the truth about that, and two, how it'll work. Usman's wrestling has always been so offensively dominant, he hasn't had to worry too much about the defensive side of things. With his knees being a little bit messed up, I'm just a little bit curious how that might, because that might work out quite well for Covington. That said, I favor the champion. Usman might be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now. He's a scary man. Co-main event, a rematch for the women's strawweight title between Rose Namajunas and Zhang Weili. I don't understand this. Well, let me rephrase. I do understand it, I just vehemently disagree. Zhang lost the first fight cleanly. I know she didn't like the stoppage. Well, she and her corner are the only people who thought that was an early stoppage. That was I thought Namajunas, I thought it was a good stoppage, for whatever that's worth. Zhang does not, if you lose cleanly your title fight, if you don't have some like long record of achievement as champion, I don't think you should be granted an immediate rematch, especially if there's no controversy over the finish. There's no controversy here, again, unless you believe, not to be indelicate, but unless you believe the Chinese propaganda, said as a joke, there's no controversy. Zhang got head kicked and finished. Sucks. And really, I mean, she was on a long winning streak, like 20 fights. But you had one title defense. Uno. Singular. And don't get me wrong, her fight with Joanna is the best women's fight ever in MMA. That was, I think, my fight of the year for that year, and it's one of the best fights you'll ever see. But one admittedly epic fight does not make a case for a rematch when you get finished cleanly. Robbie Lawler had more title defenses than she did. Got knocked out in the first round like she did not get an immediate rematch. Why? Well, because I don't know, because that's not normally what they do. They're doing it here for reasons that I could speculate about, but would be slightly irresponsible of me to speculate too much about how much the UFC has invested into the Chinese marketplace and how much they might just want to run that one back. I mean, to be fair, the fight ended in no time. I mean, it was what, a minute? You know, a minute and 18 seconds. Like, it didn't actually tell us anything about how these two match up. I favored Namajunas into that fight, I seem to recall. I favor her in the rematch. I feel like this should not have been Zhang. I feel like Zhang needed a rebound fight, but the UFC's business commitments and decisions are the UFC's business commitments and decisions, I suppose. We also have a lightweight fight between Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler. Someone's going to die. And I couldn't be happier about it. My only regret about that fight is that it's only scheduled for 3 rounds. Let those two maniacs try to kill each other. Hell yes. We have Luke Rockhold returning against Sean Strickland. That's not a bad fight. It's a fairly tough comeback fight for Rockhold, all things considered. We have a women's bantamweight fight between Jermaine Durandamy and Irene Aldana. Eh. If Aldana wins, that might get her a title shot. That needs to be noted. But it's women's bantamweight. I don't care about the majority of it. Frankie Edgar and Marlon Vera. Darn good fight. Important fight for Frankie, man. Edgar's a legend for darn good reason. But he's 1-4 in his last 3. 2-4 in his last 6. And his most recent win was a split decision over Pedro Munoz that I thought he lost. And I mean, he got knocked out cold by Corey Sandhagen in that last fight, man. Just flying knee to the chin. Just big fight for him and tough fight. Marlon Vera is nobody's stepping stone. Not unbeatable. In fact, I might favor Frankie, quite honestly, but not an easy fight. And lastly, currently announced Al Iaquinta and Bobby Green. Al's been out for a while. Last time Raging Al fought. Yeah, he got beat by Dan Hooker in October of 2019, so he'll be out for almost, it'll be over 2 years. My inclination is towards Green anyway, but that'll be weird. It'll be a weird fight. Enjoyably weird or just weird. We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, that's UFC 268 at the moment. I bring that up because whatever the configuration is for the main card, that's going to be a darn good pay-per-view fight on paper. So hopefully that all holds together because it's a very good night of fights as far as that goes. All right, let me double check Twitter for any potentially breaking news, and if there's nothing there, we will go ahead and close up shop. All right, nothing looks like it's broken. Okay, I have to say this. Kay Hansen, who currently fights for the UFC, a reaction to the Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley fight was Jake Paul versus Francis Ngannou was the only answer. Francis would absolutely take that payday. Just for the record, because you know he'd make more from that boxing fight than he would ever in a single UFC fight. Oh, God. It's funny, though. I'm not telling you to like the Pauls, man. I'm really not. But the salty people who just don't like the guy and think that because they don't like him, he should have lost. Get some logic, people. You score the fight based on the established criteria. Jake Paul won. You don't have to like it. I'm not asking you to like it. I'm not asking you to like him. But the number of people who are allowing themselves to be driven into a battle with reality by this guy is comical. Whatever. All right. As for my plugs, I already mentioned Mark Radulich and I did some watch-along stuff for the Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley fight. This week, I will be hosting 2 different movie review podcasts about the same movie. On Tuesday, there will be a traditional Damn You Hollywood for the Candyman. I can't really call it a remake, but the new Candyman movie. One of those will be just myself and Mark Radulich. That will be the traditional Damn You Hollywood, where you will get us talking about the movie, talking about the money, talking about the critics, that whole everything that is Damn You Hollywood. Then in the evening, I'm going to be hosting a 5-person roundtable discussion about the film. That's going to be myself, Jason Teasley, Alexis Haina, James Greco, and then Dorian Price, a friend of Alexis Haina's, who will be we're just going to kick the ball around as far as that goes, I think. So, if you're interested in the new Candyman film, I will have plenty of coverage for you over on the W2M network, so give that a listen. Or just you type Damn You Hollywood in and the W2M network stuff should come up. Feel free to follow all of our podcast related activities over there. Okay. That's it. I believe that's it for me. So, well, then the usual stuff. AEW Dark Elevation Monday, MLW Wednesday if they have anything, SmackDown on Friday, and then the UFC event on Saturday. So that's what's on my schedule. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Deeply appreciate it. Until next time, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.